A very good morning to you, and welcome to Chai with Viji. This is December's talk. My name is Viji, and I am an Ayurvedic birth expert and founder of Divine Journey. I help women through traversing various thresholds in their life. And every first Sunday of every month, I host a Chai with Viji, which is an opportunity for us to gather together as community, as friends, in a space where we can learn and share and gather and commune. Today's topic is the space in between. And this is a continuation of a couple of chais ago that I have done where we have gone over the various elements that exist in nature as well as the different doshas. And today we will be discussing the element of ether, which is really reflective of the space in between. So I want to begin, as I begin all of my talks, showing again the five pillars that I have created and follow for Divine Journey. So, I do these talks because I think it's very important for us to have an opportunity and a space to be able to understand ourselves better. And that is always done by creating awareness about the self. When we create awareness about the self, then we can understand the context in which we exist and how we interact with that context. And from there, then, we can use the wisdom, the tools, the knowledge, and the community around us to be able to support ourselves, and then integrate all of that wonderful knowledge and learning that we did gather to create transformation and good health and good well-being for ourselves. So today we are going to be exploring the space in between. And something that I just want to emphasize at first is that this space, which we often see as emptiness, is really not emptiness, but it is where the pause lives. And this is an important concept for us to hold in our mind as we move forward. So what I want to do is I want to turn off my video and then I want to um, discuss, I want to go into a practice where it's an ancient practice called the So-Hum breath. And it invites us to be in a state of practice where we can feel very viscerally that moment of pause. So I'd like for all of you to sit down in a comfortable position wherever you're at. And most of us are in a chair. So I'd like for you to then bring your feet to the ground. Feel Mother Earth beneath you, holding you and supporting you. Now, in Sanskrit, the word or the words so and hum mean I am that. It is reference to being connected to the universal consciousness, to everything, the source in the world, and to create a feeling of belonging and connection. Now, when we do breath work, the real medicine lives not in the inhale or the exhale, but truly in the quiet pause that exists between them. This is the place where nothing is happening, and yet everything is happening. So close your eyes and let's just begin by taking a few nice, normal, deep breaths, just listening to the sounds around us and giving in to the practice that we're going to do this morning. Now let's begin. Take a gentle inhale and mentally whisper, so. And then exhale slowly, mentally whispering, hum. At the end of your exhale, don't rush into the next breath. Let yourself rest in the soft, natural pause. And then inhale. Pause, exhale. Now keep going several rounds and notice that moment, the stillness, the spaciousness, the quiet fullness of being held. It is this pause, the field where the next breath forms, where you either inhale or exhale, where healing begins, where the next thought, where the next moment, where the next breath ripens and forms. Enjoy every part of this breath, but especially the moments in between. Now come back to our talk. And how did you feel? How did you feel doing this breath? Oftentimes, when we need it the most, we do breath work, but we do it as marking off a checklist, something to do, something that's part of our spiritual or even everyday yoga practice. And what ends up happening sometimes also is that when we are feeling stressed or rushed or scared or worried or anxious, we tend not to want to go to our breaths. And I don't know about you, but every time I do this breath, I may find a little bit of resistance as I go into the practice, but when I actually do it, I can feel every part of my body just drop, relax, and ease into just doing the practice. And so it's very important to understand this because this is really a very easy go-to practice that not only emphasizes and connects us to something greater than ourselves, but the idea that this breath is there, this space is there for potential, for creation, for possibility. When we talk about the element of ether, it's something that can often be very esoteric, not understood, because it isn't something that we get to see or hear or smell. It is a very potent element, but one that is difficult to grasp. Now, when we look at the five elements, the first four that you see here are things that we can easily connect to: earth, water, fire, and air. But it is the element of ether that actually allows the container for these four elements, four other elements to exist. And it's important because ether is actually what makes breath possible, what makes movement possible, what makes healing possible. And so it is the place where all other elements can take form. And even the energetic forces in our body that we've discussed before, vata, pitta, and kapha. It is in this element, in this tattva of ether, that they are able to be experienced. So it's a very, very important element that we will learn more about today. In the Shastras or the ancient texts, we have definitions for all of the elements. And as I've mentioned before, the definitions are usually given within the context or by the means of gunas or qualities that certain things possess so that we may better be able to understand them. And so now when we look, right, at the qualities of ether, we see that we have shunya or empty. And this gives about a sense of spaciousness. And when we do interact with that ourselves, then we see that there is inner room to breathe, to feel, and to pause. Now, next, when we look at lagu or the lightness of ether, there comes about a certain level of clarity, of thoughts that are unburdened and come with ease. Then sukshma or subtle also describes ether. And there is an awareness that comes with that. And so that awareness, on a subtle level, is our own intuition that we can tap into, something that we sense, some quiet truth that we feel or that we have a sense of knowing. Vyapaka, or expansiveness, is about presence. And truly, this is where deep listening, the ability to feel and be connected and be open, is there. Ananta, or the infinite nature, gives a sense of expansiveness. And in that way, creativity can flow, new ideas can emerge, and it feels quite natural. Finally, soft openness is a quality of ether that's also permeating. And in this way, there is ease of breath, timing itself just flows, and there is a silence that is nourishing. We experience these same qualities in an imbalanced way. Something that is empty can be too empty. And in that way, when it affects us, we will feel or we can feel disconnected, lost, or checked out. When something is too light, then we may feel ungrounded, you know, um, unable to kind of think and focus or feel grounded and landed, and we feel very, very scattered. When something is too stable, then it has the ability to affect us, and we tend to feel overly sensitive, overwhelmed, by anything that we hear, that we feel, that we taste, that we any input that comes to us. And then Vyapaka again, when things are too expansive, then we don't have the sense of boundaries, which are really important. So we may take on too much, we're feeling overly exposed, burnt out, things like that. When something is too infinite, then we feel that, it's not something that we can kind of connect ourselves with and feel grounded. We feel adrift. We feel like we're disassociated, and we have a sense of loss of time, loss of space, loss of connection. And finally, when something is too permeating, then we tend to absorb everything around us. And again, that can just feel like we lose ourselves and we feel drained, and we feel really, really affected by everything around us. So these are the ways in which the element of ether and its qualities can influence us both in a positive as well as negative way. And, it'll be very helpful for us to think about how these qualities are experienced by us in everyday life. When is it that we feel like we have good boundaries and we're able to take in what's around us? We're connected to our intuition. We feel almost like we feel supported, that whatever we do, we can connect to others, but not feel a loss of ourselves. On the other hand, when do we feel so overwhelmed and affected by the things around us, overly sensitive to things, wanting to do too much, and then not having, a sense of control over that? It's very important for us to be aware and think about it, because these are circumstances in which the element of ether or space is out of balance in our life. Now, as always, when I'm talking about these elements, it's important then for us to be able to find concrete ways in which we can experience these, and how can we actually be aware of and tell whether we are in or out of balance. So let's look at how we are holding the element of ether emotionally. So we can experience it as calm, on the other hand, anxiousness. We can be clear when in balance, yet confused when not. We can feel a sense of presence, that we're aware of what's going on and that we are in the moment, or we're somewhere else and absent. We can feel connected to ourselves, to those around us, to the things around us, or we can actually feel isolated, irrespective of the circumstances that we're in. We can be open-hearted, or we can be closed off. We can be receptive, or we can be defensive. We can be grounded, Or we can really feel untethered and like that balloon that's just flying away and not able to get ourselves kind of grounded. And finally, we can feel spacious or we can feel quite constricted. Now, how do we hold these same, the same element of ether? How do we hold it physically? Now you'll see again a lot of these opposites that begin, for example, with the breath, because it really is one of the very internal, yet from external to internal ways in which we can experience in our body this element of space and of pause and of breath. So when there's a steady breath, um, the opposite of that, excuse me, is having a shallow breath and not being able to breathe freely and completely and wholly. We can have a relaxed chest, one that's loose or a tight one. We can have soft rib cage or an expanded rib cage that shows ease and openness and um, great ease. We can have a grounded stance or an unstable footing. Or we can experience that in our senses we are really clear and we're aware, or we have sensory overload and can't handle it. A stable gait versus being, having stumbling experience and sensation. We can have a gentle posture or a very rigid posture where we're, getting ready for that like fight or flight. And finally, we can have restful sleep or we can have insomnia. So these are the ways in which a balanced and imbalanced element of ether can influence us in our life. And now, as always, what is very, very important for us to understand, because most people are not able to connect, these ideas of the elements and what and how it can affect our body. Is it just what we eat? Is it just like the environment that we're in, like being cold or being warm or anything like that? And really, it is anything that we experience that goes through our sense organs that's going to bring us an influence. And in awareness and understanding how these happen, we can we can mitigate change and mitigate experience. So it's based on what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we eat, and what we feel or what we touch. And through all of these ways, this is how input that comes externally, internally, can influence us and affect us. And so it's always important to be aware of that. And oftentimes we're not aware. So when we're not aware, the best thing to do, right, is to sit with, oh, okay, how do I feel right now? What do I feel right now? And take that knowing or that feeling, because it may not be grounded in knowing, but take that feeling and start to ask the questions of maybe why and how. And so slowly you'll begin to understand maybe if it was something you saw, you smelled, or any other ways in which you had sensory input that began to influence you. Oh, well, that happened and that bothered me, or that affected me, or oh, I realized I feel this way. And that's the beginning of awareness and understanding. And then the next step to be able to use that knowledge and change so that you live, a life of better support, better ease, better health, better happiness. Now, the fascinating thing is that, we talked about how it shows up emotionally, how it can show up physically, but what happens actually when we have the biological activation? That means in our body, what happens when we activate or are aware of or invite the element of ether? Because the space in between the breaths is not empty. It is extremely physiologically intelligent. So let's go into that right now. So an interesting fact, right? So first and foremost, the vagus nerve is a very important nerve that innervates numerous parts and numerous organs in our body. It innervates the throat, the heart, the lungs, our digestive system. And it's very important because how we feel, right, is going to either activate or inactivate, weaken or strengthen this vagal nerve. And depending upon the response that we have to certain stimuli, our vagus nerve is going to respond. And then that has a downstream effect on the organs that I just mentioned, right? And so, when the vagus nerve becomes active, it is a pathway that we can utilize, right? When we understand for calming, for grounding, and rejuvenating and restoring the body. So this is very, very important because when it does get activated, your heart rate slows, your blood pressure drops slightly, and the body actually shifts from being nervous or stressed and in that fight or flight to that rest and digest parasympathetic pathway, which is very important. So, what is this saying? That when we actually do pay attention and take that breaths, research has absolutely shown that the vagus nerve activates in such a way that it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So, biologically, taking that breath, having that pause actually has a physiological positive impact. And when it doesn't, it can have a negative impact. The next aspect is something called brain quieting. So you can see here that there are two different parts of the brain, the medial prefrontal cortex, as well as the posterior cingulate cortex, that are involved in basically responses like thinking and responses that we have, to stimuli. So this brain quieting phenomenon, right, is actually is what it refers to what's known as the default mode network. And essentially what it is how we respond to, what happens around us. What are we thinking when things happen, about planning and worrying and thinking about things that happen. Of all of us do this. So it's that part of the brain, these two aspects, right, that generates this chatter. Now, when we utilize the breath and have that pause, then we actually downregulate that DMN network, these parts of the brain that are activating this chatter. So it's very important. And so again, research has shown that this is the case. So when we activate that space, when we activate that breath, then we are also doing what's known as brain quieting, helping our mind quiet down and for us to feel safe and regulated. The next is that same breath, right, has the ability to balance the carbon dioxide and oxygen levels in our body. So when we get stressed, right, there is a phenomenon. We start to breathe more shallow, we start to breathe more rapidly. And so our body's trying to intake this oxygen. And we actually do get an influx of excess oxygen, right? And the thing that happens actually is that there isn't enough carbon dioxide. And it is important to have this balance between the carbon dioxide and the oxygen levels because it is when we pause our breath rather than, when we go from that shallow, rapid breathing and pause our breath, that then the body naturally says, oh, wait a minute. Like I need to increase carbon dioxide a little bit, which then when that happens, it actually allows the oxygen that we are intaking when we have an inhale breath to be delivered to the tissues. It relaxes our muscles, our blood vessels widen, and really we get a sense better of clarity and focus. So this is the basic respiratory physiology that occurs, and it occurs when we actually take that pause in that breath that we did in that Soham exercise. And so the pause actually balances the carbon dioxide and oxygen, and it helps in that oxygen delivery, which also helps to relax and support us. So the next thing that happens also, what happens inside our body when we actually take that pause in that breath is that it helps also synchronize the heart-brain pathways, the communicative pathways that occur. So the heart, right? The heart also responds to external stimuli, to stress, right? We see this in the electrocardiogram, the ECG. And basically, there's an electrical signal that is released or that is created by the heart and communicates, and that's how it communicates to the brain as to like what's going on. And normally, what happens is that when we are stressed, it creates this first erratic, heart rate, and then when we are, and it's a bit chaotic. And so what then ends up happening is that the brain also is like, oh gosh, like I need to do something. I need to get in protection mode. But when we utilize that breath and we give that pause, the heart actually then sends a more smoother, as you see in the second tracing signal, and that then stimulates the vagus nerve, and that it amplifies the regulation of our nervous system. So again, the pause that exists, the pause that's created by that breath that we take, right, creates a more steady and smooth heart rhythm, and then our brain can synchronize with that and create, our sense of stability, sense of clarity, and sense of calm. Okay, and finally, so the last part of this story is that there's a part in our brain called the amygdala. And essentially, what it is it's like the alert center. Something is going wrong, we're in trouble, we need to know that we're in trouble. That lights up in our brain. But what happens is it obviously increases the stress hormones in our body, cortisol, etc. And then that causes a downward cascade of events. Our body gets tight, we feel like we're in danger, and and then that has its own issues, right? We don't feel safe, etc. Now, when we slow our breath, especially again in that pause, then we are telling our body, because what ends up happening is there's receptors in our lungs that actually activate when it stretches, and it's when we get that full breath, that gives signals to the brain, says, hey, we're doing good, we're relaxed, we're safe. And so then that cortisol level falls in the body and the whole system then softens. So when we again take that breath and take that pause, it is a calming signal to the body. So again, it's through that vagus nerve activation that we get that mind body relaxation. So here is the interesting thing. I have showed you, right, that when we inside our body, when we take our breath and we actually pause, so that means the moments, or when we give into, when we are consciously making that pause between inhale and exhale and back to inhale, that moment of ripened potential that seems to have nothing but actually has everything is a mirror, very much based in scientific fact, medical fact, that there is a number of events that happen inside biologically in our body that creates a sense of safety, creates a sense of potential, creates a sense of healing, and it does a number of things to our body, right, and our mind. So now, these are so this that is related to our breath. How can we then understand real life circumstances that happen to us outside of our breath, many of which are outside of our control? How then does the breath translate to our real life situations? Okay, well, let's see. So the first thing is, so there are various circumstances where, for example, we are waiting for something to happen. Oftentimes we are, waiting in the various stages of our life, whether it be that we want to get pregnant and we're trying to conceive, whether we're pregnant and we're waiting for the moment of labor and birth, and then afterwards, whether we're waiting for some sleep after our baby is born. But in all fairness, we spend a lot of time being put in situations, various life circumstances where we're waiting, right? And so this is an opportunity let's put it this way, this is a circumstance where nothing is happening. And oftentimes our immediate response is to get frustrated, is to be disappointed, is to get upset, is to rush from one moment of doing or being into another one. And so, keep that thought there. The next is a next moment of pause, basically forced pause that we have and are given in our life, uncertainty, when we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what to do next. We don't know how to do whatever that is next. or we don't even know if next is coming. This is another moment of pause. Again, any transitions that that occur in our life, and it doesn't necessarily have to be biological. When we're in between jobs, when we are doing new things, learning, growing, encountering new circumstances, and there's going to be transitions and change. That is a moment where you're neither here or neither there. Normal things like delays and obstacles. I was once, many times, delayed on planes, traveling to certain places, certain things completely out of, your control. These are also pauses and times where it's like a break, whether desired or forced, or just happening. Again, moments of disappointment where things don't happen the way that we want them to happen. And so we're left in a place where, we are blank. We don't have anything. What do we do then, and how do we process? And finally, life's pauses, general pauses. So all of these, right, are seemingly kind of potentially innocuous, but these are what make up life experiences. And oftentimes, when we are in these life experiences, waiting, uncertainty, transitions, delays, disappointment, processing, or life pauses, that's the time where we are so desperate to do whatever possible to get out of those circumstances completely, right? We're uncomfortable, we're angry, we're anxious, we're fearful, we're worried. We don't know what to do, and we are racking our brains trying to do things. And oftentimes we do too much during that time because we think that that's what's going to take us to our next step. But these are actually moments, right, that carry the exact same potential as that pause in the breath. Because we can use this time to recalibrate, to soften that urgency, to understand the possibility, to prepare, to invite creativity. So it's very important that we understand the impact of all of these pauses, because these are oftentimes the hardest moments, right? But they can become the most productive ones. And it's our opportunity to give ourselves that chance to take that space. Because the space, they say, so above, so below, and so outward is so inward. The macrocosm is very much mirroring the microcosm and vice versa. And so when we learned and we experienced that breath, and how even for a moment it made us feel better, made us feel less racy, that is what moments in our life can also do for us. And it's a matter of shifting perspective. I think it's important for us to understand that it's okay to have these pauses where seemingly nothing happens, because clarity begins to form. And it can begin to form in seed form, in root form, maybe not something that we're immediately conscious of. And it allows us the opportunity. A lot of people, what we can do is meditate, we can rest, we can reflect. So these are ways in which we can manage these different changes that occur. Now, it doesn't mean that the feelings that we have are not valid. We feel sad when we have a loss, sad, or when we have an identity shift, or that things happen that we didn't expect or want, or feel good about. But they are certainly opportunities to grow, and can really be an amazing and beautiful door into something that we would have never expected. So how can the element of ether and all of what we talked about affect us? Let's go through the different stage gates, the different transitionary periods in a woman's life. And let's begin with space before conceiving, right? So when we look at the element of ether at the time where we're trying to conceive, this would be a time, when balanced and positively influencing us, that gives us the opportunity to be open and accept readiness that comes in its own timing, right? And so we're open to what we didn't know, how we can heal. We're open to our own intuition. And so that allows us to be reflective. And that reflection then creates a sense of safety, a sense of calm that we can use for preparing. So when we shift our energies in this way and we can harness this element of space, we can utilize it in a positive way to influence what we are doing. And again, sometimes not doing is what is going to give that momentum to us. Now, a potential impact of having this, right, is obviously we have that clarity. We are connected to our intuitive timing and our own readiness. And so this is really, really important. Now, when there's ether or space that's imbalanced, this is where we are really not comfortable with that feeling of being in between, right? We just feel like, oh my gosh, lost. I don't have any direction. And sometimes this, having that space just feels like too much. It's like, wait, I should be doing something. Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? Am I not doing this? Am I doing that? And so so many people I know get into this spiral, place. So it's important as you hear all of this and understand that this is really a reflection of us not really feeling into and allowing what is going on at the moment, which is that, that potential is doing its work to create something that is coming. And when, again, like there's a sense of having too much space, and then there's also a sense of having not enough space. And that's where we're like, oh my gosh, I need to do this right now. I need to get pregnant right now. What am I not doing? And we do things, but they don't have a positive or effective impact, right? So then we start to become disconnected with who we are and what we're thinking and what we're feeling and what we're experiencing. This is where then women start to experience irregular cycles, confusion, depletion. And so this is very, very important, for us to pay attention to because it can absolutely impact us. Now, during pregnancy, there comes then when we have balanced ether, a deep intuitive connection to ourselves, to our baby. We kind of are really aware of what we feel, and we are open to understanding that there is a creative process going on. We don't see it, but we are growing our baby, right? And that sense of allowing gives not only us peace and calm, but really the baby, because what we do when the baby's in utero is actually creating that baby. So giving that space, allowing these processes to occur is so important. And when we do this, we can be more present. We actually can create deeper bonding with our baby, and we have a sense of emotional ease. Now, this is really, really important for many reasons because, especially in Ayurveda, we understand that during pregnancy, how the mother feels and how the mother is creates the space within her uterus, the environment within the uterus where the baby's growing. I know so many moms who, they go through pregnancy, not even like, and they almost say it as a badge of honor, but the truth is that they are not connected to their baby or their pregnancy. And that, might make them or help them to kind of move through life and do things. But there is a connection that gets established that grounds your baby that is needed. And so that's really important for us to be present. Now, when we are imbalanced, then that's when we just don't, again, like we're not tethered. We feel that floaty sensation and we're sensitive to everything around us. We may have no idea like what's going on and we feel overwhelmed and we're generally just disconnected. And again, so this brings about a lot of emotional, issues that we may experience, anxiety, overwhelm, and just a general disconnection from our body. And so then we're not, and we won't be able to troubleshoot what's going on because we don't even understand what is happening. Now, after we have the baby in the postpartum, right, this is going to affect the way that we, connect to our baby and how we feel in this moment of transition going from, you know, an individual person to being a mother, caring for someone else's needs, being connected to their needs, and when we have enough space, when we've created that for us, we are able to take care of ourselves and take care of, our child. And so the positive impact is that we'll have strong bonding with the child. We ourselves will be able to process what we're feeling, recognize what we're feeling, and move through that in a much, much healthier way so that it doesn't impact us physically. So when we are imbalanced in this way, absolutely, mothers can feel empty, numb, disconnected. This is a large reason why, this type of disconnection can actually lead to postpartum blues, postpartum depression. A lot of women feel disconnected from their babies. They're not bad. There's just, the process of birth itself or other circumstances around them have, created a situation where this ether element is out of balance, right? And later on, we're going to talk about how to get that back into balance. So then it becomes like everything is, too lonely, too silent, and or too much to handle. And many women absolutely feel a loss of identity, and just not connected, to their own body, to their experience. It's like a dream for them. And in this way, like I said, this is where the depression, the anxiety, the disassociation, and the difficulty to kind of even be present after the birth and for the baby happens. Now, in this last part, when we move into the time of menopause, it certainly is a time of transition between, having a cycle and then entering a phase where you're in a different cycle without, menstruation. And so in this way, when that space is there for us to be able to integrate, then it's an opportunity to be empowered, have a reclamation of yourself. You're able to, really intuit and be connected to your own thoughts, your own feelings, and have a sense of clarity. Um, there is a gentleness that you exert on yourself, and a real openness into where you're going. And this is where that transition, that phase into this different stage can be a lot smoother. And so when that happens, your this time of your life is really then centered around that wisdom, around that clarity, and an opportunity for us to reinvent ourselves. And it can be a beautiful time, but that container needs to be very strong. Now, when out of balance, then this is again where you see this common theme of feeling floaty or untethered or ungrounded, disconnected. And then we lose our connection to the things around us. We don't remember things. There's a lot of dryness in the body. We feel overstimulated. We feel empty. So, and there's a tendency then to just kind of withdraw as a means of dealing with it. And it's quite challenging then with all of these sensations to manage that time of transition. And so the potential impact for this, again, in this stage of life is the same emotional movement that results in anxiety, disconnection, and acceptance. So now we've come to the point, where we experiencing a number of different things, and I have showed you ways in which this element of ether is important and how it exists in our life, and how part of resetting this balance, between almost like freedom and spaciousness with tightness and kind of constrictiveness. Um, and one of these is with literal pause and breath. But there are other ways. And so in Ayurveda, we talk about using the opposite qualities of something in order to balance it and placate any, excessiveness that might be there. So when we talk about how physically, we can ground spaciousness. We talk about warmth, weight, right? Literal weight, and and how to influence our environment so that we feel supported, and we can create that healthy space. So, warm meals, warm touch, through heat packs or your own, self massage. These are very important because it brings that visceral feeling, opposite of that kind of flighty floatiness. And brings us down. And heat also allows us to feel more grounded, and it brings us back into our body, which then also, makes us go more into the sympathetic nervous system. And again, so that we don't feel floaty or flighty, anything weighted, like, so feeling cozy, getting something that's heavy and having that amazing weight on us. Any type of routine, rhythmic movement will help us and feel comforted. This is why people move in certain ways and rock. Um, this is why babies love to be held and rocked and swayed, because it really does make somebody feel safe. And in our own environment, we should make sure that it is comfortable. It doesn't have as much stimuli, that's kind of exacerbating and heightening our senses. And so it's an opportunity for us to go inward. Now, going back to the breath is, as I've already shared with you, even from a physiological standpoint, an amazing way. And there are many different types of breath, breath work that do different things. And these are a couple that specifically help to bring that feeling of calm, that feeling of ease, that feeling of safety and regulation to the nervous system. So we have that Soham breath, which we did, and that is, there is an emphasis on the exhale just so much as that space that exists. But anywhere that we create that space, whether it be in between the inhale and the exhale, or in between the exhale and the inhale on the other end, you're creating that space. Absolutely will work. And we talked about that vagus nerve stimulation. The box breath is in some ways a similar thing, but we are now counting. So for a certain number of breaths we inhale, certain number of breaths we hold, certain number of breaths we exhale, and then a certain number of breaths we hold again. And this again very deliberately creates that space, and it helps us to go from that state of overstimulation to calm, rest, and ease. Then, Brahmari is a type of vibrational breath work where we inhale, hold our breath, and create a sound by humming, and that sound creates a vibration. And oftentimes when we want that space within us to be clear and open, there may be blockages there, blockages that are physical, blockages that are emotional, blockages that are spiritual, whatever they may be. So that vibration helps to break up that and actually gives a grounding to the nervous system. And one last thing is that we have what are called nadis, or energy channels in the body. And, these are essentially like the nervous system pathways. So we have the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. When we do specific, and what I mean by specific, only like, for example, blocking your right nostril and doing inhaling and exhaling through one side or the other, we can activate a certain part of the nervous system. And when we do left nostril breathing, we are activating the parasympathetic rest and digest part of the nervous system. So again, this brings our own internal sense of calm, warmth, and containment, and support. Now, a few last other things where we have, emotional and energetic remedies, and energetic ways to ground that ether element. So we can do that through our, simple routines, like we discussed already, having connection, with people, with things. So really just kind of like inviting people into our space, especially when we feel like it's too much, in the sense that we feel lonely, and then being aware of that space when we feel like things are too much. Again, that sound is going to create that vibration within us, and this will also help a baby. Babies respond to the sound of our voice. And so when we do this, this will really, really support filling that space with something very calming, loving, and energizing. Of course, the type of music matters. Calming, soothing, instrumental music is usually wonderful. Creating boundaries for ourselves is very, very important. Now, these are three unique ways of creating boundaries. So when I talked about opposite, salt baths are wonderful. Now, salt has the quality of being heating. There's a quality of being a sharp and also a quality of being heavy. So it allows the body, so on a physiological level, to feel grounded when we do salt bath. So that's something that you can go to. Now, creating boundaries for ourselves, like a closing, or rather an opening and closing, not ceremony, but practice that you do so that you yourself are coming into a place of awareness and deliberateness, right? You are there consciously is very important because that conscious creation allows you to manifest what is in alignment with yourself and what you need and what you want, and placing those boundaries with others as well. And then finally, I'm a big proponent of this. Creative expression, whether it be through art, whether it be through journaling, whether it be through creating a certain space literally, is so important, right? So, one of the things that I do with my clients is this type of coaching that tries to understand our inner makeup. So this is important because that inner makeup takes up space within us. And and invariably at different times in our lives could support us or create, havoc within that space. This is where we have like these competing ideas, these competing feelings, these competing thoughts, experiences, right? And so I always akin it to like a project team. And when we work together with that inner project team, we can create an environment that is supportive holistically of all of us. So I mention this because it's not only an opportunity when you journal to kind of note down the different feelings and things that you have, how you feel, how you were impacted. It's also an opportunity to go inward and understand how we feel so that you can then start cleaning up or supporting, that space within you, right? Because, I think part of creating space is that we have resistance, right, to creating space. We oftentimes think that creating space is waste of time, that, oh my gosh, like I have something to do, I have something due, I have a deadline, I have an expectation that I need to meet. And if I don't work continuously or, that hard and all the time, then it's not going to get done. And the thing is that that is not the case. Sometimes there's a better idea that comes up when we pause. Sometimes we get the energy, the literal energy, and the clarity of mind when we take a little bit of space. So it's very important for us to not only recognize what a simple yet profound concept this creating space is, and how it actually literally does impact us, but how we can then superimpose or transpose that very understanding biologically into the moments in our lives that we invariably face because we are human, and things that we don't expect, that want, and that come to us that are really difficult, that feel sad, that feel angry, that feel worrisome. How can we meet those moments, right? And it's not to say that feeling those emotions are invalid. No, they are invalid. And when we feel them, we are feeling our human experience. But it is an opportunity to feel them, but then also understand and bring in practices and thought processes that we know can shift that, can transform that space that is filled with this uncomfortableness, um, to something that is more easeful, that then allows us to be in a place and a state where we can do things with more presence, with more care, with more love, with more freedom, with more ease, with more happiness, and then create good health. because essentially that's what's the most important. And so I wanted to end this Chai with Viji to share that I hope that all of us take the time, right, to really begin to slowly, slowly, one by one, moment by moment, time by time, incorporate this concept of space and start to become okay with it. Start to remind ourselves that we're okay with it because it is from that space that potential absolutely arises. That is an opportunity for us to integrate. And it's an opportunity really for us to prepare, right? To go into it consciously with awareness, that we can bring our presence and enjoy the experiences that we're in and not just do it as a checklist. And it is absolutely a moment where becoming begins. So I thank you very much for joining me with this chai with Viji. The funny thing is that I did this chai live and it didn't get recorded. And so, today was a day where space obviously had to be filled twice, but I invite you to join me in my future chais with Viji. The next 3 months, which is January, February, and March, I will be doing a continuous series, meaning that we will be talking about the cyclical nature of a woman. We'll be talking about the cycles that a woman experiences, her menstrual cycles, and how that impacts us, what's normal, what's not normal, how to support ourselves, really how to troubleshoot various situations and circumstances, and understand how the cyclical nature and our bodies and what happens impacts us on every single level, what it means, what it shows, and how we can use it to support ourselves. So thank you so much and hope to see you in the next Chai with Viji. Take care.